we are not ready with all those PowerPoint shows, but at least we have a picture to show you, which is connected with one very important thing that we discussed, and that is about the brain. And we said when we speak about existence, we are also speaking about time. That means that we think of having existent in the past, and that we might be existing in the future, and that we are existing now. Now, existence has to do with the past, present and future. So, we are also existing in space. We think in terms of space, existing in space. And that is, we are mainly concerned with the body, because the body occupies a certain amount of space. And other than that, also we have houses that we live in, or maybe jobs that are connected with a certain area that we travel about. So we have a certain amount of space that we occupy in existence. So when we think of existence, we are not only thinking about the space occupied by the body, but also the space occupied by our actions. You can't hear me properly, huh?
I'm recording. So
you are recording. Okay. Well, now according to some research worker who has been doing research about the brain, and this is a lady who was doing research, and this person happened to have had a stroke. You know what a stroke is. And there, in that, the stroke is, of course, paralysis of one side, like the arms and the legs of one side. And the real reason for that is not so much the area affected. The cause is in the brain. That it could be due to a block in a blood vessel in the brain, or it can be due to some blood clot, or it can be due to a burst of a blood vessel. And in this particular case, it was some bursting of a blood vessel or some blocking that occurred. Maybe blood clot or something like that occurred on the left side of the brain. And this lady who was doing the research was the person who met this stroke. But she has been of course later recovered, and also she's explaining what she experienced. And the most important thing that is being explained is that memory of the past and the thinking of the future, that time disappeared. And so she was living at least for a certain period without this idea of time. And so, and this idea of time comes from the left side of the brain. That is what she's trying to say. And so it's very interesting to listen to her, and she's a good speaker also. And so before we start our other discussions, it would be interesting for you to see this and listen.
I grew up to study the brain because I have a brother who has been diagnosed with a brain disorder, schizophrenia. And as a sister, and later as a scientist, I wanted to understand, why is it that I can take my dreams, I can connect them to my reality, and I can make my dreams come true? What is it about my brother's brain and his schizophrenia that he cannot connect his dreams to a common and shared reality, so they instead become delusion? So I dedicated my career to research into the severe mental illnesses, and I moved from my home state of Indiana to Boston, where I was working in the lab of Dr. Francine Bennis in the Harvard Department of Psychiatry. And in the lab, we were asking the question, what are the biological differences between the brains of individuals who would be diagnosed as normal control, as compared with the brains of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, or bipolar disorder? So we were essentially mapping the microcircuitry of the brain, which cells are communicating with which cells, with which chemicals, and then in what quantities of those chemicals. So there was a lot of meaning in my life because I was performing this type of research during the day, but then in the evenings and on the weekends, I traveled as an advocate for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. But on the morning of December 10, 1996, I woke up to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. A blood vessel exploded in the left half of my brain. And in the course of 4 hours, I watched my brain completely deteriorate in its ability to process all information. On the morning of the hemorrhage, I could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of my life. I essentially became an infant in a woman's body. If you've ever seen a human brain, it's obvious that the two hemispheres are completely separate from one another. And I have brought for you a real human brain. So this is a real human brain. This is the front of the brain, the back of the brain with the spinal cord hanging down. And this is how it would be positioned inside of my head. And when you look at the brain, it's obvious that the two cerebral cortices are completely separate from one another. For those of you who understand computers, our right hemisphere functions like a parallel processor, while our left hemisphere functions like a serial processor. The two hemispheres do communicate with one another through the corpus callosum, which is made up of some 300 million axonal fibers. But other than that, the two hemispheres are completely separate. Because they process information differently, each of our hemispheres think about different things, they care about different things, and dare I say, they have very different personalities. Excuse me. Thank you. It's been a joy. right now, we are brothers and sisters on this planet, here to make the world a better place. And in this moment, we are perfect, we are whole, and we are beautiful. My left hemisphere, our left hemisphere, is a very different place. Our left hemisphere thinks linearly and methodically. Our left hemisphere is all about the past, and it's all about the future. Our left hemisphere is designed to take that enormous collage of the present moment and start picking out details, and more details about those details. It then categorizes and organizes all that information, associates it with everything in the past we've ever learned, and projects into the future all of our possibilities. And our left hemisphere thinks in language. It's that ongoing brain chatter that connects me and my internal world to my external world. It's that little voice that says to me, hey, you gotta remember to pick up bananas on your way home. I need them in the morning. It's that calculating intelligence that reminds me when I have to do my laundry. But perhaps most important, it's that little voice that says to me, I am. And as soon as my left hemisphere says to me, I am, I become separate. I become a single, solid individual, separate from the energy flow around me, and separate from you. And this is the portion of my brain that I lost on the morning of my stroke. On the morning of the stroke, I woke up to a pounding pain behind my left eye. And it was the kind of pain, caustic pain, that you get when you bite into ice cream. And it just gripped me. And then it released me. And then it just gripped me. And then it released me. And it was very unusual for me to ever experience any kind of pain. So I thought, okay, I'll just start my normal routine. So I got up and I jumped onto my cardio glider, which is a full body, full exercise machine. And I'm jamming away on this thing. And I'm realizing that my hands look like primitive claws grasping onto the bar. And I thought, that's very peculiar. And I looked down at my body, and I thought, whoa, I'm a weird-looking thing. And it was as though my consciousness had shifted away from my normal perception of reality, where I'm the person on the machine having the experience, to some esoteric space where I'm witnessing myself having this experience. It was all very peculiar, and my headache was just getting worse, so I get off the machine, and I'm walking across my living room floor, and I realize that everything inside of my body has slowed way down. And every step is very rigid and very deliberate. There's no fluidity to my pace, and there's this constriction in my area of perception, so I'm just focused on internal systems. And I'm standing in my bathroom getting ready to step into the shower, and I could actually hear the dialogue inside of my body. I heard a little voice saying, okay, you muscles, you gotta contract, and you muscles, you relax. And then I lost my balance, and I'm propped up against the wall. And I looked down at my arm, and I realized that I can no longer define the boundaries of my body. I can't define where I begin and where I end, because the atoms and the molecules of my arm blended with the atoms and molecules of the wall. And all I could detect was this energy. And I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And in that moment, my brain chatter, my left hemisphere brain chatter, went totally silent. Just like someone took a remote control and pushed the mute button. Total silence. And at first I was shocked to find myself inside of a silent mind. But then I was immediately captivated by the magnificence of the energy around me. And because my job and any stress related to my job, it was gone. And I felt lighter in my body. And imagine all of the relationships in the external world and any stressors related to any of those, they were gone. And I felt this sense of peacefulness. And imagine what it would feel like to lose 37 years of emotional baggage. Oh, I felt euphoria. Euphoria. It was beautiful there. And then again, my left hemisphere comes online and it says, hey, you've got to pay attention. We've got to get help. And I'm thinking, I've got to get help. I've got to focus. So I get out of the shower and I'm mechanically dressed. I'm walking around my apartment and I'm thinking, I've got to get to work. I've got to get to work. Can I drive? Can I drive? And in that moment, my right arm was totally paralyzed by my side. Then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke. I'm having a stroke. And then the next thing my brain says to me is, wow, this is so cool. This is so cool. How many brain scientists have the opportunity to study their own brain from the inside out? And then it crosses my mind, but I'm a very busy woman. I don't have time for a stroke. It's like, okay, can't stop the stroke from happening, so I'll do this for a week or two, and then I'll get back to my routine. Okay, so I got to call help. I got to call work. I remember the number at work. So I remembered in my office I had a business card with my number on it. So I go into my business room. I pull out a 3-inch stack of business cards, and I'm looking at the card on top. And even though I could see clearly in my mind's eye what my business card looked like, I couldn't tell if this was my card or not, because all I could see were pixels. And the pixels of the words blended with the pixels of the background and the pixels of the symbols, and I just couldn't tell. And then I would wait for what I call a wave of clarity. And in that moment, I would be able to reattach to normal reality. And I could tell, that's not the card, that's not the card, that's not the card. It took me 45 minutes to get 1 inch down inside of that stack of cards. In the meantime, for 45 minutes, the hemorrhage is getting bigger in my left hemisphere. I do not understand numbers. I do not understand the telephone, but it's the only plan I have. So I take the phone pad and I put it right here. I take the business card and I put it right here. And I'm matching the shape of the squiggles on the card to the shape of the squiggles on the phone pad. But then I would drift back out into La La Land and not remember it when I come back if I'd already dialed those numbers. So I had to wield my paralyzed arm like a stump and cover the numbers as I went along and push them so that as I would come back to normal reality, I'd be able to tell, yes, I've already dialed that number. Eventually, the whole number gets dialed, and I'm listening to the phone, and my colleague picks up the phone and he says to me, and I think to myself, oh my gosh, he sounds like a golden retriever. And so I say to him, clear in my mind, I say to him, this is Jill, I need help. And what comes out of my voice is, and oh my gosh, I sound like a golden retriever. So I didn't know that I couldn't speak or understand language until I tried. So he recognizes that I need help, and he gets me help. And a little while later, I'm riding in an ambulance from one hospital across Boston to Mass General Hospital, and I curl up into a little fetal ball, and just like a balloon, with the last bit of air just right out of the balloon, I just felt my energy lift, and I felt my spirit surrender. And in that moment, I knew that I was no longer the choreographer of my life, and either the doctors rescued my body and gave me a second chance at life, or this was perhaps my moment of transition. When I woke later that afternoon, I was shocked to discover that I was still alive. When I felt my spirit surrender, I said goodbye to my life, and my mind was now suspended between two very opposite planes of reality. Stimulation coming in through my sensory systems felt like pure pain. Light burned my brain like wildfire, and sounds were so loud and chaotic that I could not pick a voice out from the background noise enormous and expansive. It's like a genie just liberated from her bauble. And my spirit soared free like a great whale gliding through a sea of silent euphoria. Nirvana. I found Nirvana. I remember thinking there's no way I would ever be able to squeeze the enormousness of myself back inside this tiny little body. But then I realized, but I'm still alive. I'm still alive, and I have found Nirvana. And if I have found Nirvana, and I'm still alive, then everyone who is alive can find Nirvana. And I picture a world filled with beautiful, peaceful, compassionate, loving people who knew that they could come to this space at any time. And that they could purposely choose to step to the right of their left hemispheres and find this peace. And then I realized what a tremendous gift this experience could be. What a stroke of insight this could be to how we live our lives. And it motivated me to recover. 2.5 weeks after the hemorrhage, the surgeons went in and they removed a blood clot the size of a golf ball that was pushing on my language centers. Here I am with my mama, who's a true angel in my life. It took me 8 years to completely recover. So, who are we? We are the life force power of the universe with manual dexterity and 2 cognitive minds. And we have the power to choose moment by moment who and how we want to be in the world. Right here, right now, I can step into the consciousness of my right hemisphere where we are. I am the life force power of the universe. I am the life force power of the 50 trillion beautiful molecular geniuses that make up my form. And one with all that is. Or I can choose to step into the consciousness of my left hemisphere, where I become a single individual, a solid, separate from the flow, separate from you. I am Dr. Jill Taylor, intellectual, neuroanatomist. These are the we inside of me. Which would you choose? Which do you choose? And when? I believe that the more time we spend choosing to run the deep inner peace circuitry of our right hemispheres, the more peace we will project into the world, and the more peaceful our planet will be. And I thought that was an idea worth spreading.
If you listen to it carefully, you would notice that she was talking about what we have been talking about. It's very interesting to know that modern scientific thinking is all not only agreeing but supportive of what we are saying. And so we can understand how much the Buddha knew about these things. And today we get into this. Now I don't have the time to go through this whole thing. We can discuss some of this next time. And the important thing is to understand that we were talking about what we call the Sublime Eightfold Way. I use the word sublime to indicate that this is not a normal way of looking at the world. It's a different way of looking at the world, which is not abnormal in the sense that the way that those who are insane see the world. This is a supernormal way. It's not the normal, it's not the abnormal, it is a supernormal way. And so when we speak of this eightfold way, which is a way to rise above the normal state to a supernormal state, and that is what I call the process of evolution of the human being. The human being evolves to a higher level in becoming a Buddha. And that is the teaching of the Buddha, to bring this normal reality to a supernormal reality. So I said, there is no such thing as truth. We are not talking about the truth or falsehood. We are only talking about a different way of seeing things. And this different way, which is called the supernormal way, puts an end to all suffering in the world. And the main suffering that we were talking about is what we call the insecurity of life. The insecurity of life is death. No one wants to die, but we have to die. And that is the insecurity of life. And most people, of course, want to stop thinking about it and start enjoying life till we, without our knowledge, we disappear. So that is what normally people do. Eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow you will die. So that's the normal attitude. And there are also some religions, which means it's not just, I won't like to talk about it as a different religion, but it is the normal thing that most people who are not advanced in the religious life, when religion was at the early stages, people didn't know how to solve this problem. It was a problem. So what they thought was, they used their imagination and they began to think that they'll be able to run away or escape from reality into a dream world, from reality to fantasy. And that dream world is a world where there is no death, there is no suffering, there is no unhappiness. You have eternal life and eternal happiness. That is what is called the heaven. Heaven is a place where there is eternal life and eternal happiness. So they dream about this, and so the whole religious life is based on that. That if you belong to a certain religious tradition, then you'll be safe, and when you die, you'll automatically go to heaven. This is why the bishop once said, we have a hope. The hope is that we'll be able to go to heaven and be free of all this trouble. But these Buddhists, they have no hope, because they want to die and die forever. So I had to point out that although some Buddhists believe like that, that is not what the Buddha pointed out. The Buddha made an effort to face the reality instead of running away from the reality, and solve the problem by finding the cause of the problem. And he discovered that the cause of the problem was the belief in the existence of the self. That existence itself is what becomes the cause. And so, the only way to solve the problem is to realize that we don't really exist. And why we think we exist is based on this thing called memory. If we didn't have a memory, we would not be thinking of a thing called the past. And if we didn't have the imagination, we will not be able to think of the future. What we call the past is simply a memory, and what we call the future is simply imagination. So, it is only when we realize this that we realize that there is no real existence here. And this is what this lady was talking about. That this thinking in terms of past, present, future is mainly responsible for the left side of the brain. And when the left side stops working, then that feeling of existence disappears. This is what she was talking about. And there is no separation as a self from the world. The world and self, we said, is an experience which is subjective and objective. The subjective and the objective experience disappears. This is why in Hinduism they say that thou art. That means you are that. Now when we speak of I, we are separating ourselves from the rest of the world. So, here in the Hindu way of thinking, they say, you are that, that means I am that. So that is the external thing, and I is the internal, subjective, that is the objective. So the subjective and the objective becomes one. Tattvamasi, that is the Sanskrit form of that. Tat means that. Tvam means you. Asi means you are, the are. A-R-E-R. Or like the is. I-S is. Which means existence. Or being. So in all these spiritual evolution of the human being begins to realize the absence of the self. But in Buddhism, the Buddha has pointed out that even to say Tattvamasi is not correct. Because even in that unity and the diversity, the unity and the diversity has to be given up, both. So that we are not thinking of a union and we are not thinking of a separation. Both are given up in the idea of what is today used in the Mahayana as sunyata. Sunyata means it's a little different from the Tattvamasi. It's the emptiness of both the subject as well as the object. It is the absence of both the subject as well as the object. So there is no union in this, and there is no separation. So the important thing in understanding what are called the four sublime realities. The four, I don't use that common translation like Four Noble Truths. I call it the fourfold sublime reality. The fourfold sublime reality. And sublime eightfold way. So today we are mainly talking about that sublime eightfold way, which consists of 8 steps in the process of evolution. 8 steps. And the 8 steps, Samma Ditti is the first one. Samma Ditti, which I translated as the harmonious perspective. I use the word perspective to show that it is not just another view. It is more like the angle of vision, to see things from a different angle. That's the perspective. Just like you use a camera to take pictures, you can take it from different angles and the picture becomes different. So, these differences doesn't mean that these are different things. These are different aspects of the same thing. But the important thing is, it is according to the way we see circumstances that we react to it. The way we react to it depends on the way we perceive what is going on. So the harmonious perspective is the perspective that doesn't create conflict. Harmony means it doesn't create conflict. So all the suffering comes from conflict. The Buddha uses the analogy of the blind man and the elephant to show this, that the different blind men came and touched different parts of the elephant, and they said, that is the truth. Whatever the person who touched the tail of the elephant thought the elephant was like a broom. Another man who touched the legs thought the elephant is like a tree. Another man who touched the ears thought the elephant is like a fan. So you see, these different perspectives create conflict. So, because one man's idea is different from the other person's idea, because they hold on to that as the truth. But the harmonious perspective means that we don't hold on to anything as the truth. Although we can agree with all the conflicting views, but we don't hold on to any one of those views. That was the position taken by the Buddha. So the Buddhists really should not have any views. And that is the harmonious perspective. Not to cling to views. There is the story of one of the chief disciple out of the layman was Nigantanatha Putra, who was a millionaire and also the person who donated the Jetavana Ram. Huh? Yeah, what did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. I used the wrong word. Yeah, Anatha Pindika. Yeah, Anatha Pindika, not Nigantanatha. Thank you for showing. This Anathapindika was going one day early morning to see the Buddha, and on his way he had to pass a place where these different ascetics and also philosophers at that time used to meet and have discussions. And so he dropped in there to find out what these people were talking about. And so when these people saw Anathapindika coming, they were very silent and welcomed him, and then Anathapindika, of course, asked them, what were you discussing all these days? So they said, we were discussing various things, but that's not so important. We like to hear from you what the Buddha teaches. What does he teach? What is his view about life and things like that? So he said, well, I am not able to tell what the Buddha thinks or his views, because I may be making mistakes about if I begin to talk about what the Buddha said. Now we must also understand that Anathapindika, although he was a lay follower, he is one of those people who had attained to the first step in the process of evolution, or the what is called Sotapanna. Sotapanna means enter the stream. Entering the stream means entering the path that leads to Nibbana, which is what we call the Sublime Eightfold Way. So he is one who has entered, and one who has entered is having the Sammaditthi. Sammaditthi, which is the right, I won't say right, the harmonious perspective. So he had the harmonious perspective. So, but still he didn't say he can say what the Buddha said. So he said, I don't know what the Buddha said, what the Buddha teaches or what his ideas are. I can only talk about what I know and what I think. Then they said, okay, you tell us what you know and what you think. Then he said, well, if you want to know what I think is that all these different views that you are talking about and different people who express their views, these views are based on certain conditions. Everything in the world is dependent on conditions. And whatever is dependent on conditions is unstable. Unstable, or some call it impermanent. That means we cannot really depend on them because they are unstable. And what is unstable is unpleasant because we can't depend on those things. Unpleasant. And what is unpleasant is not as we want. And what is not as we want cannot be called mine. We cannot personalize it and say this is mine. And what is not mine is to be given up. And therefore, I have given up all views. Then these people said, well, although you have given up all these views, you have a view, and that is that these views are dependent on conditions, unstable, unpleasant, and therefore they are not yours and they should be given up. That is a view. So you are holding on to a view which is suffering, because you said those views are suffering, unpleasant. So you have got hold of an unpleasant view. So that's also correct what they said. So he said, well, it is true that this is a view that is unpleasant, and that is why I have given it up. And so I have made use of this view to give up all views. So they had nothing to say. So he left them and went to the Buddha and told Buddha about what happened. And the Buddha said, you have very beautifully expressed yourself and you have understood. And so, because he was a stream entrant or Sotapanna, one who has entered the stream. So it is very important to understand that when you have understood the harmonious perspective, what is important is that you have understood that the cause of this problem, which is the problem of life, which is death itself, is caused by our emotion, not our reason. That reasoning is not what makes us attached to things and personalize things and get the idea. I thought last time I explained this. Maybe I will explain it again just for you to understand and remember it. It is simply that we all experience through our senses three kinds of sensations: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. The pleasant, the unpleasant, and the neutral. And this pleasant experience, we begin to like, and the unpleasant experience we dislike. So the like and the dislike, which comes in the form of a desire and hatred, and the neutral sensation, it's not so much a thing that we like or dislike, but it gives us the idea that there is something existing or being, and that is why it is called bhava. Bhava means existence. And so this emotional reaction to these three kinds of sensations is what is called tanha. Tanha. And this tanha comes in the form of kama tanha, which is the desire for the pleasure, and bhava tanha is the desire for existence. And vibhava tanha is the desire for non-existence of the unpleasant sensation. We don't want the unpleasant sensation. So the Kama Tanha, Bhava Tanha and Vibhava Tanha, those are the three words, which is really the reaction to the unpleasant sensation, not unpleasant, all the three kinds of sensation, the reaction to the pleasant, unpleasant and neutral sensation. So, with this reaction comes two other things, the subjective and the objective. Because that desire or the hatred or even the idea of existence is personalized. And what is desired, which is the object, is alienated. So, there is a separation. This is mine and that is the other. So, what is mine is upadana. We are personalizing. So, all that has been personalized as mine becomes myself. The totality of the personalized things becomes myself. That is what is called the Pancha Upadana Khanda, which is today translated as the five aggregates. But I don't call it aggregate, it's better to call it a collection or accumulation. Or the cumulatives. And so, what has been collected from the past, we collect everything and then through that process we think of an identity, of a self. The identity of the self comes from the accumulation of what has been perceived from the past, all the memories that we have collected is what becomes the past. And then using those same memories, we begin to imagine the future. And so we think of a thing called future. And so we begin to plan. And we plan and we try to achieve what we plan. And we have a goal. We also think of a goal. And we are trying to achieve. But we never think that we are also going to die. So these are the things that normally people we forget about death, and we are planning the future, and very often what we plan doesn't come to be realized, and then we become unhappy as a result. Some of our dreams are shattered, and then we become unhappy as a result. So, but the important thing is to understand this. Simply because we are going to die, we don't have to start crying. That's not the thing. The important thing is when we have understood all these things, we also begin to understand, even though we think we are, still it is not a truth. Because our reasoning part, which we call mano, is able to understand things. But the emotions are not able to understand anything. But the emotions become very powerful, and it is the emotion that creates the idea of a self and an other. So when we have understood this properly, then our next step is to try to get rid of these emotions and not to be carried away by emotions and to act rationally rather than emotionally. Now that is what I call a goal orientation. We change our goal in life. So our goal is not satisfying desires, but getting rid of desires, getting rid of emotions, not being carried away by emotions. That becomes our goal in life. It is this goal orientation that leads to the right behavior in terms of right speech, right action, and right lifestyle or living, how we live. So our life begins to change at this point. And that changed way of living becomes possible due to this change in the way we think, which I call a paradigm shift. And also the goal orientation or goal reorientation. That means changing our goal. Like a vehicle that has been going north, now turns round and goes south. It's a thing like that. Now if you are driving the vehicle and you are going north, now you take a U-turn and begin to go in the opposite direction. And that is the goal orientation, or goal reorientation. And so, once we have done that, you have entered the stream. That is what is called entering the stream. And when you have entered the stream, you have become a Sotapanna. So your aim in life is to somehow get rid of emotions. And you have also understood that there is no real self here to talk about or to satisfy or to defend or any of those things. And so, I think we can stop here for the day because we have another day to finish the other part. So we have really finished 5 steps. The Sammaditthi or harmonious perspective, Samma Sankappa, the harmonious orientation, Samma Vacha, harmonious speech, Samma Kammanta, harmonious action, and Samma Ajiva, harmonious living or lifestyle. I am using that word lifestyle because it was used by a psychologist, Alfred Adler. So it's more appropriate. Then most people interpret this as right livelihood or the job that you are doing. It's not the job here that is important. Your life. It's not just isolated actions that we are talking about. It is your whole life. Where is your life going? It's mainly based on the goal. When the goal has been changed, your life changes. Okay, because we have only another 25 minutes or so. So you can ask questions and we can discuss. And this entering the stream is like a lock that has been put into a river, and this will gradually float into the ocean. So it may be blocked here and there sometimes, but somehow it is gradually the current in the river carries it to the ocean. So in the same way, a person who has entered the stream is definitely bound to attain Nirvana. That's what it means. Within 7 lives, he will be entering Nirvana, even if he neglects himself.
One thing, I'm a bit confused. The earlier statement, changing the orientation, like from going downstream, change, like from going north to south, you change and go to north.
Yeah, if you are going downstream, then you are going upstream now.
How does the log go into the sea?
No, these are mixing two analogies. This analogy where the log is going to the sea is really to talk about the meaning of entering the stream. But on the other hand, if we make use of that same analogy to explain what is really happening in the mind, in that case, what is really happening is that if you are floating in the river, carried away by the current, that can be compared to your emotions, carried away by emotions. Now, instead of being carried away by emotions, you begin to swim against the current and come to the land. So that is the meaning of really practicing the Dhamma.
I beg your pardon. One should look at the context rather than like a tree from a forest.
Yeah. What's that?
One should not interpret the context of the statement, but like identifying a tree from a forest.
Yeah. We have to understand the context, when we use the analogy. Yeah.
But then just now you mentioned that if one enter the stream, that it will take 7 lifetimes to attain Nibbana, even if he neglects himself. What does Bhante mean by even if he neglects himself?
What?
Bhante mentioned that if one enter the stream, so he will take 7 lifetimes to attain Nibbana, even if he neglects himself. So just wondering what Bhante meant by even if he neglects himself.
Oh, it's like, say, if you put the lock into the stream, maybe the lock gets caught by some branch of a tree or something like that, which is already in the river, and it gets blocked there. But then when the water in the river rises up, sometimes it can get out of that place and then begin to float again, you see. So in a similar way, once you have understood really the Dhamma in the proper way, that is, you have got the harmonious perspective and you have even changed your goal, and then you have been working at it, but still sometimes you're carried away by emotions and you begin to start doing the wrong things, and then again you realize it is wrong and then begin to start going on the right direction. It's a thing like that. So you can delay by doing things like that.
Excuse me, Monday. By the statement 7 life or 7 beliefs of 7 life, then I like to think of reincarnation, and it will one would procrastinate, I would procrastinate, and go back to my old bad habits. Because I got 7 lives. Then I'll become like a Christian. How big about it?
Yeah, that is the sort of thing that can happen. This is why I spoke about this neglecting. That you can fall into bad company. Very often that is how it happens. And say you are not a person who drinks or takes alcohol or something like that, but then your friends come and force you, and then you begin to take it, and then gradually, if every day your friends come and take you into these wrong habits, then it can develop into a habit, and then it becomes difficult for you to control the habit. And so this way becomes delayed, the path becomes delayed. So this is how it happens.
Bhante, how would you know if you've entered the stream? How would one know if he has entered the stream?
The only thing is there are 3 things that have to be broken. One is Saddhatissa, there are 3 things, Vichikiccha and Silabbata Paramas. Saddhatissa means to believe in a self, that you are thinking that there is a self here, and you have not been able to finally decide whether there is a self or there is no self. So when you have fully decided that and understood it fully, that means you are free from the Saddhatissa. And then Vichikiccha means the mind pulling in 2 different directions. because your emotions pull in one direction and the thinking goes in the other direction. So if you are carried away by your emotions, mainly due to that, so vicikiccha has to be given up. Then the other one is Silabbata Paramasa. Now Silabbata Paramasa is usually today translated as rites and rituals. But that is not correct. It's not rites and rituals. It is Sila and Bata. Sila means not doing bad things. Bata means doing good things. Paramasa means following these principles to satisfy others. Now, if you are living a good life to satisfy other people, or because you want to, you are frightened of going to hell, or you are desirous of going to heaven or something like that. These are external things making you behave in a good way. So it was not real, genuine desire to be good. Now, desire to be good comes from your understanding of the importance of others' happiness and feeling for others. It's a what you call being responsible for not disrespecting life, disrespecting other people. You are interested in the welfare not only of your own self but all beings. So it is that way of thinking that is you are avoiding bad things not because you will be punished or because other people want you to do it. You are doing it because you don't want to hurt other people. You feel for others. So that is the real meaning of Silabbata Paramasa. This is called, when you talk about morality, you can talk about autonomous morality and heteronomous morality. Heteronomous morality is morality practiced because other people want you to do it. But autonomous morality is where you practice morality because you want to do it. Now that is the meaning of not breaking Silabbata Paramasa. Silabbata. So those are the three characteristics that you have to find out whether the person has entered the stream or not. So any other questions?
Talking about Saddhatissa, when you say that it's with the views, harmonious views, when you talk about the story from the Thera
Say it loud because I can't hear sometimes.
I just want to get some clarification about Saddhatissa when you say about harmonious views. when you talk about the story of from the Nikaya, the
Anguttara Nikaya.
Yeah.
No, Anapindika.
And you talked about him not clinging to anything.
Anathapindika. Yeah.
Anathapindika.
Yeah.
When you talked about that story, you talked about not clinging to any views. So how do you? I'm just trying to understand the harmonious view versus not clinging to any views at all. Do we not cling on to the harmonious views as well, the harmonious perspectives?
Harmonious perspective is where you create harmony instead of conflict. So if you hold on to a view and say you are wrong, I am correct, that is not a harmonious view because you are creating conflict. But if you say, this is what I think, you can have your own views, but this is what I think. And then you talk about that. You are not creating a conflict.